Carl Jung often returned to one haunting observation. Those who walk in truth become mirrors, and mirrors are rarely welcome. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the shift before you even spoke? The conversations that pause mid-sentence, the smiles that don't reach the eyes, the sudden defensiveness from people who barely know you. You're not imagining it. Neuroscience has proven that when you enter a space, others' brains unconsciously mirror your emotional state through specialized neurons. But what happens when your inner world is more developed than theirs? What happens when your presence carries the weight of someone who has faced their shadows while they're still hiding from theirs? Carl Jung spent decades studying this phenomenon, the way authentic individuals unconsciously trigger what he called shadow projection in others. Your presence becomes a mirror, reflecting back everything they've refused to acknowledge about themselves. And that makes you dangerous. Not because you're trying to harm anyone, but because you represent what they could become if they had the courage to look within. Before we dive into Jung's psychology, let's understand what's happening in the brain. When you walk into a room, something remarkable occurs beneath the level of consciousness. Mirror neurons, specialized brain cells discovered in the 1990s, fire both when you feel an emotion and when others observe you feeling it. Research shows that emotional contagion is real. Your calm literally activates their calm. Your authenticity challenges their masks. Your depth exposes their surface-level existence. But here's what makes this unsettling. Most people aren't ready for that level of honesty. Jung called this individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming whole by integrating both light and shadow aspects of yourself. When you've walked this path, even partially, your presence carries a different frequency. You radiate what Jung termed psychological integration, and it's felt before you speak a word. Carl Jung discovered something that explains why your presence triggers such strong reactions. We don't just see others, we see ourselves reflected in them. When someone has done inner work, faced their fears, embraced their contradictions, they become what Jung called a living symbol of possibility. Your very existence whispers to others unconscious. This is what wholeness looks like. But for those still trapped in what Jung termed persona living, the false masks we wear to survive society, your authenticity feels like an accusation. Your silence becomes judgment. Your self-respect becomes arrogance. Your boundaries become coldness. This isn't about you. It's about what you represent. You've become someone else's mirror, and not everyone is ready to see their reflection. The 13 signs we'll explore today aren't flaws in your character. They're evidence of your growth, and evidence of others' resistance to their own. You've experienced this countless times. You're in a group conversation, listening deeply, saying little. Not because you're shy or disengaged, but because you're actually present, absorbing, processing, feeling the undercurrents that others miss. But your silence makes them uncomfortable. They start filling the space with nervous laughter, unnecessary explanations, or they begin talking at you instead of with you. Research shows that mirror neurons fire not just during action, but during purposeful inaction. When you're silent with intention, truly listening rather than waiting to speak, others' brains register this as a completely different frequency than empty silence. Jung wrote about what he called active listening as a form of psychological containment. When you hold space without trying to fix, advise, or fill silence, you create what he termed a temenos, a sacred psychological container where truth can emerge. Their discomfort with your silence reveals their discomfort with depth. People who fill every pause with noise are often running from their own inner voice. Your stillness forces them to hear what they've been avoiding. Notice when your silence triggers others. Instead of feeling obligated to speak, ask yourself, what are they trying not to hear right now? Your silence isn't emptiness, it's presence. And presence is what the world is starving for. It happens everywhere. Coffee shops, elevators, waiting rooms, Strangers start telling you about their divorce, their childhood trauma, their secret fears. Friends call you when their world is falling apart. You become everyone's emotional safe house. But here's what's strange. You didn't ask for these confessions. You weren't fishing for personal information. You were just being yourself. Neuroscientist research on oxytocin and mirror neurons shows that when someone feels psychologically safe, their brain releases bonding hormones that make disclosure feel natural, even necessary. Your nervous system regulation literally helps regulate theirs. Jung observed this in his practice and called it the analyst's paradox. The more integrated you become, the more you unconsciously invite others' shadow material to surface. You become what he termed a vessel for the collective unconscious, not by trying, but by being whole enough to hold others' brokenness without breaking. People confess to you because you don't judge. You've learned to hold your own contradictions. They're drawn to your lack of moral superiority because deep down, they're exhausted from pretending to be perfect. Set boundaries around emotional labor. Just because you can hold others' pain doesn't mean you should carry it. Ask yourself, am I healing with them or healing for them? The former is healthy. The latter leads to burnout. You walk into a meeting, job interview, or social hierarchy, and something shifts. The person in charge becomes defensive. They start over-explaining their position, questioning your qualifications, or dismissing your input before you've barely spoken. You're not challenging them directly. You're not being confrontational. But your presence itself feels like a challenge to their authority. Research on dominance hierarchies shows that authentic confidence, what psychologists call quiet confidence, activates threat responses in those whose authority depends on others' insecurity. Your nervous system stability literally destabilizes their power dynamics. Jung wrote extensively about what he called natural authority versus positional authority. Those who have done inner work carry what he termed the authority of the self, an inner sovereignty that doesn't need external validation. This threatens anyone whose identity depends on being above others. Their intimidation reveals that their authority is constructed, not earned. True leaders aren't threatened by authentic people, they're drawn to them. Only those leading from insecurity feel challenged by your inner stability. Don't shrink to make insecure leaders comfortable. Your authenticity isn't arrogance, it's medicine for toxic power structures. Ask yourself, am I being genuinely respectful, or am I performing submission? Choose respect over performance. Weather conversations, celebrity gossip, surface-level work updates. You try to engage. You smile and nod, but something inside you starts to wither. Your energy doesn't just drop, it feels actively drained, as if something essential is being pulled from your core. You leave these interactions feeling more lonely than if you'd been alone. Neuroscience research shows that meaningful conversation activates the brain's reward centers and releases connection hormones like oxytocin. Surface-level interaction, by contrast, activates stress responses because your nervous system recognizes the disconnection, even when your mind tries to rationalize it. Jung believed that the psyche has an innate drive toward meaning, what he called the transcendent function. When you engage in meaningless exchange, you're literally working against your psychological nature. Your soul recognizes the absence of soul in the conversation. People who only engage in small talk are often protecting themselves from deeper intimacy. They've learned that surface level is safer than soul level. Your discomfort reveals that you've outgrown the safety of superficiality. Don't force depth where it's not welcomed, but don't force yourself to stay shallow. Practice saying, I tend to connect through deeper conversations. What's really going on with you? You'll be surprised how many people are waiting for someone to ask. It's uncanny how it happens. The nervous dog in the corner comes directly to you. Children who are shy with adults light up in your presence. Even wild animals seem less afraid, more curious than cautious. You're not trying to attract them. You're not using treats or tricks. Something about your energy feels safe to beings who rely purely on instinct. Research shows that animals and children read nervous system states through micro-expressions, pheromones, and electromagnetic fields that adults learn to mask. Mirror neurons in both animals and children are hypersensitive to authentic versus performed emotions. Jung believed that children and animals exist closer to what he called the natural self, unfiltered by social conditioning. They respond to your energy because individuation brings you closer to your own natural state. You've stripped away enough artifice that they recognize something real. When adults comment on how animals and children love you, there's often a note of surprise or even envy. They're witnessing something they've lost, the ability to recognize and trust authentic presence. Your natural magnetism reminds them of what they've buried under layers of social adaptation. Pay attention to how animals and children respond to you, but also notice your response to them. Their unconditional acceptance can teach you to accept parts of yourself you still judge. What do they see in you that you struggle to see in yourself? You step into a room, and within seconds, you know. The couple who just fought, the underlying tension in the family dinner, the artificial cheerfulness masking disappointment at the office meeting. Others seem oblivious, chatting and laughing, but you feel it all. The unspoken resentments, the hidden grief, the carefully maintained illusions. Neuroscientists have discovered that highly sensitive individuals have more active mirror neuron systems and heightened activity in brain regions processing emotional and social information. Your nervous system literally functions as an emotional antenna, picking up micro-signals others miss. Jung called this unconscious perception, the psyche's ability to sense what lies beneath surface presentations. He believed that those who have integrated their own unconscious material develop heightened sensitivity to unconscious material in others and environments. When you mention sensing weird energy in a space, and others dismiss it, they're protecting themselves from feeling too much. Your emotional attunement threatens their carefully constructed emotional walls. They need those walls. You've learned to live without them. Learn to distinguish between what's yours and what belongs to the environment. Before entering social spaces, ground yourself. What am I feeling right now? Then notice what shifts. You're not responsible for healing every emotional wound you sense. They call you arrogant when you're confident, selfish when you have boundaries, too sensitive when you feel deeply. The accusations don't match your intentions or actions, but they're delivered with such conviction that you start questioning yourself. You've become a screen for others to project everything they can't accept about themselves. Neuroscience research on defense mechanisms shows that projection activates when the brain encounters traits in others that trigger shame about similar traits in ourselves. The unconscious mind literally attributes internal conflicts to external targets to protect the ego from discomfort. Jung identified projection as one of the primary ways people avoid confronting their shadow, the parts of themselves they've rejected or repressed. When you embody qualities they've disowned, confidence, sensitivity, boundaries, their unconscious launches these qualities back at you as criticisms. Their projections are actually confessions. When someone calls you too much, they're revealing their fear of being too much. When they label your boundaries as selfish, they're showing their own struggle with self-care. You're carrying the disowned parts of their psyche. When faced with projection, ask, what part of themselves are they seeing in me that they can't accept? This isn't about taking responsibility for their healing, but understanding the psychological dynamics so you don't internalize their disowned shadows. You've learned to say no without elaborate justifications. You choose authenticity over approval. You've stopped performing happiness when you're not happy. This freedom, quiet, undramatic, but unmistakable, triggers something primal in those still trapped by others' expectations. They call you selfish, unrealistic, or going through a phase, but their irritation reveals the truth. Your liberation reminds them of their own cage. Research on social conformity shows that when group members witness someone breaking social rules without consequences, it creates cognitive dissonance. Their brains must either acknowledge their own conformity choices or dismiss the rule breaker to maintain psychological comfort. Jung wrote about individuation as inherently threatening to the collective. When you stop living by unconscious social contracts, performing happiness, prioritizing others' comfort over your truth, you become what he called a reminder of unlived life to those still choosing safety over authenticity. Their irritation with your freedom reveals the price they believe they're paying for belonging. They've traded pieces of themselves for acceptance, and your wholeness highlights their fragmentation. Your freedom exposes their voluntary imprisonment. Don't shrink your freedom to make others comfortable, but don't flaunt it either. Your liberation serves the collective by showing what's possible. Ask, how can I live my truth without making it a judgment of their choices? Your freedom is medicine, not a weapon. You're sitting quietly, minding your own business, when suddenly someone snaps at you, or breaks down crying, or becomes inexplicably angry. You didn't say anything provocative. You weren't being judgmental. You were just there. But your presence alone was enough to crack open whatever they'd been suppressing. Neuroscience research shows that when people encounter someone with regulated nervous system functioning, it can trigger what psychologists call emotional flooding in those with unresolved trauma or suppressed emotions. Your stability becomes a catalyst for their instability to surface. Jung observed that integrated individuals often become containers for projections of others' unconscious material. Your psychological wholeness creates a safe enough space for repressed emotions to emerge, even when neither of you consciously intends it. Their sudden emotional reactions aren't about you, they're about what you represent. Your emotional regulation reminds their psyche that it's safe to feel what they've been avoiding. You've become an unconscious invitation to authentic emotion. When someone has an unexpected emotional reaction around you, resist the urge to fix or take responsibility. Instead, hold space without absorbing their emotions. Ask, what might they need to feel right now that they've been denying themselves? There's rarely middle ground with you. People meet you and within minutes, they're either drawn to you like you're exactly what they've been searching for, or they're repelled as if you're everything they fear about themselves. You rarely get neutral reactions. You're either someone's favorite person or their inexplicable nemesis. Research on first impressions shows that people with high emotional authenticity trigger immediate limbic system responses, the brain's ancient fight-or-flight mechanism. Your realness bypasses social filters and speaks directly to others' unconscious, creating instant attraction or rejection. Jung wrote about what he called archetypal activation, when someone embodies qualities that either inspire or threaten others' deepest psychological patterns. You've become what he termed a living symbol, representing either possibility or judgment to different people. Love at first sight responses reveal their hunger for authentic connection. Immediate dislike reveals their fear of being truly seen. Both reactions say more about their internal landscape than about you. You're simply the screen onto which they project their relationship with authenticity itself. Stop trying to be universally liked. Your polarizing effect is evidence of your realness, not a flaw to fix. Ask, am I being true to myself, or am I performing to manage others' reactions? Choose truth over approval, always. They're performing happiness, but you feel their sadness. They're displaying confidence, but you sense their terror. They're acting busy and important, but you recognize their emptiness. You don't mean to see through their acts. It's not conscious analysis. You just feel the discrepancy between what they're showing and what they're actually experiencing. And somehow, they know that you know. Neuroscientist research on microexpressions and incongruent communication shows that people with integrated emotional systems can detect misalignment between verbal and nonverbal cues up to 500 times faster than the conscious mind can process them. Jung believed that confronting your own shadow your rejected and hidden aspects, develops what he called psychological discrimination. When you've stopped performing your own false selves, you naturally recognize performance in others. Their discomfort around you reveals how much energy they spend maintaining facades. Your ability to see through performance threatens the carefully constructed image they believe they need to survive. You represent the terrifying possibility of being seen completely. Use your insight compassionately. Remember that most people perform because they believe their authentic selves aren't acceptable. Ask, how can I honor what I see without making them feel exposed? Your perception is a gift. Use it to understand, not to judge. You're listening with genuine curiosity, but they become defensive. You're offering honest feedback, but they hear criticism. You're simply being present, but they feel scrutinized. The judgment they feel isn't coming from you, it's coming from within themselves. But your presence amplifies their own inner critic until it becomes unbearable. Research on shame and self-criticism shows that when people encounter someone who embodies self-acceptance, it can trigger intense awareness of their own self-judgment. Neurons make them feel your self-compassion, which highlights their self-criticism. Jung wrote about the projection of the inner judge, how people who haven't made peace with their own inner critic will experience others' presence as judgmental. Your self-acceptance becomes a mirror for their self-rejection. When they feel judged by your non-judgmental presence, they're revealing the harshness of their relationship with themselves. You're not judging them, you're just not joining them in judging themselves. And that feels foreign and threatening. When someone accuses you of judgment you're not feeling, respond with curiosity rather than defense. I'm not feeling judgmental. What might you be feeling about yourself right now? Help them recognize the source of the judgment they're experiencing. This is the sign that encompasses all others. Your years of therapy, shadow work, meditation, and self-reflection haven't just changed how you think. They've changed how you exist in the world. The peace you've made with your darkness, the boundaries you've learned to maintain, the authenticity you've fought to embody. All of it radiates outward as presence. People feel it before they understand it. Your inner work has become your outer aura. Neuroscience research on neuroplasticity shows that sustained inner work literally rewires the brain, changing everything from stress responses to social cognition. These changes affect posture, microexpressions, vocal tonality, and electromagnetic field patterns that others unconsciously detect. Jung called this individuation made visible, when the inner journey toward wholeness becomes an outer radiance. He believed that people who have integrated their shadows naturally emanate what he termed psychological authenticity, that others can sense but not always name. When people react strongly to your presence, they're responding to evidence that psychological transformation is possible. For some, this is inspiring. For others, it's threatening, because it challenges their belief that this is just how I am. Honor the journey that brought you here. Your presence isn't an accident. It's the result of conscious choice to face yourself completely. Ask, how can I embody my growth without making others feel diminished by their own journey? Your evolution serves the collective, even when it triggers individual resistance. But before we conclude, let's address the shadow side of having a powerful presence. Because there's a difference between integrated authenticity and spiritual bypassing, between healthy boundaries and emotional unavailability, between seeing clearly and becoming judgmental. If you recognize these signs but find yourself feeling superior to others, you've missed the point. If you use your insight to manipulate or control, you've weaponized your growth. True individuation includes humility. Real presence includes compassion for those still finding their way. Jung warned about inflation, becoming identified with your own development in ways that separate you from humanity rather than connecting you more deeply to it. Your powerful presence is not a badge of superiority. It's a responsibility to model what's possible while honoring others' timelines for awakening. If you've recognized yourself in these 13 signs, you're part of a rare group. You've walked the difficult path that Jung described, integrating your shadows and learning to live without masks. Your presence unsettles others, not because you're broken, but because you represent what they could become if they had the courage to face themselves completely. But here's the deeper question. Why do you have this kind of powerful presence in the first place? What creates the psychological makeup that allows you to see through facades while others remain on the surface? The answer lies in understanding what Carl Jung called the most psychologically dangerous personality type to possess. Not dangerous to others, dangerous to yourself. If you've ever felt like you're living in two realities, if you've questioned your sanity because of overwhelming insights, if you've learned to stay silent about what you see because sharing it leads to isolation, then you might be what Jung considered the most complex type to navigate. Understanding this isn't just interesting, it's essential for your psychological survival. Because Jung discovered 3 specific traps that can transform your greatest gift into profound suffering, and the integration process that transforms your curse back into a gift. Watch the hidden curse of being an intuitive introvert next to understand the deeper psychology behind your powerful presence. Because knowing how you affect others is only meaningful when you first understand why. Your story matters. Share which sign resonated most in the comments below. You might be exactly what another person on this journey needs to hear.